Jeffrey Garcia stood in his doorway, heart hammering against his ribs as he watched Nathan Rogers cross the threshold without invitation, carrying two steaming cups of coffee and wearing that crooked smile that had been undoing Jeffrey's carefully constructed walls for months. The question Nathan had texted just 20 minutes earlier still glowed on Jeffrey's phone screen, unanswered. "Do you want some company tonight?" But here Nathan was, before Jeffrey could even process what that question meant, before he could craft a response that wouldn't betray the desperate yes that had immediately flooded his chest. Nathan moved through Jeffrey's apartment with the easy familiarity of someone who belonged there, setting the coffee on the small kitchen table and shrugging out of his jacket like he'd done this 1,000 times before. But he hadn't. This was new territory, uncharted and terrifying, because Nathan had never shown up uninvited, had never brought coffee at 9:30 at night, had never looked at Jeffrey with eyes that seemed to hold questions Jeffrey was afraid to answer. The scent of vanilla and cinnamon filled the space between them as Nathan turned, and Jeffrey caught something different in his expression, something vulnerable and searching that made Jeffrey's breath catch. Nathan said, "I know I didn't wait for an answer, but I was already in the car when I sent that text, and I needed to see you tonight." His voice carried a weight that Jeffrey had never heard before, a tremor of uncertainty that didn't match the confident, straight guy Jeffrey had been friends with for 2 years. Before we see how this ends, tell us where you're watching from and hype this video in the comments. Because what happened next would change everything between them, would shatter the careful boundaries Jeffrey had built around his heart, and would force both of them to confront feelings that had been simmering beneath the surface of their friendship for far longer than either had been willing to admit. But to understand how they arrived at this moment, how a simple text about wanting company became the catalyst for everything Jeffrey had been afraid to hope for, we need to go back to the beginning, to 3 months earlier when Nathan first started showing cracks in the perfect heterosexual facade he'd worn like armor for 26 years. It had started with complaints about his girlfriend, Carol Roberts. Nathan would arrive at Jeffrey's apartment after dates looking drained, settling into the corner of Jeffrey's couch with a beer, and launching into detailed analyses of what felt wrong, what felt missing, what felt like he was playing a role in a script he'd never auditioned for. Jeffrey would listen, offering advice he didn't want to give, watching Nathan's face in the flickering light of whatever movie they'd put on as background noise. "Carol is perfect on paper," Nathan had said one particular Thursday evening in late September, his fingers absently tracing patterns on the couch cushion between them. "She's beautiful. She's smart. She laughs at my jokes. She wants the same things I'm supposed to want. But when I'm with her, I feel like I'm watching someone else live my life. Like I'm this actor who forgot his lines and is just improvising his way through scenes that don't make sense." Jeffrey had felt that familiar knife twist in his chest, the one that came every time Nathan talked about his relationship troubles. Because Jeffrey knew exactly what Nathan was missing, could see it in the way Nathan's shoulders relaxed when he walked into Jeffrey's space, in the way Nathan's laugh became genuine and unguarded when they were alone together. But Jeffrey also knew that saying any of this would destroy the friendship that had become the most important thing in his life. Instead, Jeffrey had said what he always said. "Maybe you just haven't found the right person yet. Maybe Carol isn't the one. There are other women out there." But even as the words left his mouth, Jeffrey had watched Nathan's face carefully, had seen the way Nathan's expression shifted, not toward hope at the prospect of finding another woman, but towards something that looked almost like disappointment. Nathan had been quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on Jeffrey's face with an intensity that made Jeffrey's skin prickle with awareness. Then Nathan had asked, "What does it feel like when you know someone is right for you? Not just compatible, not just checking boxes, but actually right. Like, how do you know when you're not just settling?" The question had hung in the air between them, loaded with implications Jeffrey didn't dare examine too closely. Jeffrey had felt his heart rate accelerate, had felt the familiar flush of heat that came whenever Nathan looked at him like that. Like Jeffrey might hold answers to questions Nathan was afraid to ask directly. Jeffrey had chosen his words carefully. "I think," he had said slowly, "when someone is right for you, being with them feels like coming home. Like you can finally stop performing and just exist. Like all the pieces of yourself that you have been keeping separate finally fit together into something that makes sense." You stop feeling like you're living someone else's life and start feeling like you're finally living your own. Nathan had gone very still, his eyes never leaving Jeffrey's face. And Jeffrey had realized with a jolt of panic that he'd said too much, had revealed too much of his own longing in his description of what love should feel like. But instead of pulling back, instead of changing the subject the way he usually did when conversations ventured into emotional territory, Nathan had leaned forward slightly. "Have you ever felt that way about someone?" Nathan had asked, and his voice had dropped to something just above a whisper. Jeffrey's mouth had gone dry, because the honest answer was yes. He felt that way every time Nathan walked into a room, every time Nathan smiled at him, every time Nathan fell asleep on his couch during movie nights, and Jeffrey got to watch him in unguarded moments when Nathan's face went soft and peaceful. But Jeffrey couldn't say that, so he'd deflected. "I'm still figuring things out," he'd said, which was true in its own way. "I think maybe I've been looking for the wrong things in the wrong places." Which was also true because Jeffrey had spent years trying to convince himself he could be happy with women, trying to force feelings that never quite materialized, before finally admitting to himself that his heart had always pulled him toward men, toward Nathan specifically. Nathan had nodded slowly, something shifting in his expression that Jeffrey couldn't quite read. The conversation had moved on to safer topics after that, but something had changed that night. Some invisible line had been crossed, and Jeffrey had found himself paying closer attention to the way Nathan looked at him, the way Nathan found excuses to touch him, the way Nathan's complaints about Carol became more frequent and more pointed. 2 weeks later, Nathan had shown up at Jeffrey's door at 11 at night, soaked from the October rain and looking lost. "Carol and I broke up," he'd announced without preamble, and Jeffrey's heart had done something complicated, a mixture of relief and guilt and hope that he'd immediately tried to suppress. Jeffrey had pulled Nathan inside, had gotten him dry clothes and hot coffee, had settled them both on the couch while Nathan explained how the breakup had happened. "She said I was emotionally unavailable," Nathan had said, his voice hollow. "She said I was always somewhere else, even when I was right there with her. She said she felt like she was dating a ghost. And the terrible thing is," Nathan had continued, "she was right. I was somewhere else. I have been for months. But I don't know where I was supposed to be instead. I don't know what I'm looking for or where I'm supposed to find it." Jeffrey had felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down into an abyss that might destroy everything or might save them both. The careful control he'd maintained for months was starting to fracture, and he'd found himself saying, "Maybe you're looking in the wrong places. Maybe what you're looking for isn't what you think you're looking for." Nathan had turned to look at Jeffrey then, really look at him, and Jeffrey had seen something in Nathan's eyes that made his breath catch. There had been confusion there, but also recognition, like Nathan was seeing Jeffrey clearly for the first time, seeing past the careful friendship they'd built to something deeper and more complicated underneath. "What do you mean?" Nathan had asked, and his voice had been so quiet Jeffrey had to lean closer to hear him. The space between them on the couch had felt charged, electric, like the air before a storm. Jeffrey had been acutely aware of the warmth radiating from Nathan's body, of the way Nathan's eyes kept dropping to Jeffrey's mouth before flicking back up. Jeffrey had felt his carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. "Maybe," he'd said, his voice barely above a whisper, "you've been trying to fit yourself into a life that was never meant for you. Maybe you've been so focused on what you're supposed to want that you never stop to think about what you actually want." Nathan's eyes had widened slightly, and Jeffrey had seen understanding beginning to dawn there. Recognition of something Nathan had maybe been feeling, but hadn't been able to name. The silence between them had stretched, heavy with possibility and terror, until Nathan had said, "I think I might not be as straight as I thought I was." The words had hung in the air like a confession, like a prayer, like a door opening onto something neither of them had been brave enough to walk through before. Jeffrey's heart had started pounding so hard he'd been sure Nathan could hear it, and he'd found himself unable to speak, unable to do anything but stare at Nathan's face and try to process what he'd just heard. Nathan had continued, his words coming faster now, like a dam breaking. "I keep thinking about you, Jeffrey. I keep thinking about the way I feel when I'm here, the way everything else fades away when we're together. I keep thinking about how wrong it felt with Carol, how I was always comparing her to to this feeling I get when I'm with you, and she never measured up. She could never measure up because she wasn't. She wasn't you. Jeffrey had felt tears prick at his eyes, had felt something in his chest break open like a flower blooming. All the careful distance he'd maintained, all the protective walls he'd built, had crumbled in an instant. Nathan, he'd whispered, and the name had come out like a prayer. But Nathan hadn't been finished. I don't know what this means, he'd said, his voice shaking slightly. I don't know what I'm doing or what I'm asking for. I just know that I can't keep pretending anymore. I can't keep acting like what I feel for you is just friendship when it's so much more than that. When you're the person I think about when I wake up and the last person I think about before I fall asleep. When being with you is the only time I feel like myself. Jeffrey had reached out then, his hand finding Nathan's without conscious thought, their fingers intertwining like they'd been designed to fit together. Nathan, he'd said again, and this time the name carried all the love Jeffrey had been hiding, all the longing he'd been afraid to voice. I've been in love with you for 2 years and 4 months. Since the day we met at Eric Scott's party, when you spilled beer on my shirt and spent 20 minutes apologizing. Since you offered to buy me a new shirt, even though it was a $5 thrift store find. Since you looked at me like I mattered. Nathan's breath had quit, his eyes going wide with something that looked like wonder. You have, he'd said, not a question, but a statement of amazement. You've been in love with me this whole time, and I never knew. I never saw it. Jeffrey had smiled through the tears he hadn't realized were falling. I got very good at hiding it, he'd said. I had to. I thought if you knew, I'd lose you completely. I thought it was better to have you as a friend than not have you at all. Nathan had lifted their joined hands, had pressed Jeffrey's palm against his cheek, and Jeffrey had felt a slight dampness there that meant Nathan was crying too. You could never lose me, Nathan had whispered. Never. Even when I didn't understand what I was feeling, even when I was with Carol and trying to convince myself I was happy, you were always the most important person in my life. You were always home. The word had broken something open in Jeffrey's chest, had made him understand that all the careful control in the world couldn't protect him from this moment, couldn't keep him from reaching for what he'd wanted for so long. Can I? He'd started to ask, but Nathan had already been moving, already closing the distance between them on the couch. Can I kiss you? Nathan had whispered, his forehead coming to rest against Jeffrey's, their breath mingling in the small space between their mouths. Jeffrey had nodded, not trusting his voice, and Nathan had closed the final distance with a gentleness that had made Jeffrey's heart stutter. The kiss had been soft at first, tentative, like Nathan was asking a question with his mouth that Jeffrey answered by kissing him back. But when Jeffrey's free hand had come up to cup Nathan's face, when Jeffrey had made a small sound of need against Nathan's lips, the kiss had deepened, had become something desperate and certain and right. When they'd finally broken apart, both breathing hard, Nathan had rested his forehead against Jeffrey's and said, "Oh, oh, Jeffrey, this is what it's supposed to feel like, isn't it? This is what I've been missing." Jeffrey had laughed, the sound watery with tears and relief and joy. "Yes," he'd said, "this is exactly what it's supposed to feel like." They'd spent the rest of that night talking, kissing, holding each other on Jeffrey's couch while rain pattered against the windows and the rest of the world faded away. Nathan had told Jeffrey about the confusion he'd been feeling for months, the way he'd started noticing men in ways he'd never allowed himself to notice before, the way he'd started questioning everything he thought he knew about himself. Jeffrey had told Nathan about the agony of loving him in secret, about the careful performance he'd maintained to hide his feelings, about the way Nathan's smile had become both his greatest joy and his deepest pain. As dawn had broken over the city, they'd made tentative plans to figure things out together, to take things slow, to navigate this new territory with care and honesty. Nathan had been scared, had admitted that coming out felt terrifying at 26, that he didn't know how to be how to be in a relationship with a man. Jeffrey had promised they'd learn together, that there was no rush, that they had all the time in the world to discover what this could become. But that had been 3 months ago, and the careful pace they'd planned had given way to something deeper and more intense than either had expected. Nathan had thrown himself into exploring his sexuality with the same enthusiasm he brought to everything else, had devoured books and articles about coming out, had joined online communities, and made friends with other gay men. He'd come out to his family, to his friends, to his coworkers, with a confidence that had amazed Jeffrey. More than that, Nathan had thrown himself into loving Jeffrey with a passion that had left Jeffrey breathless. The shy, tentative kisses of that first night had given way to something hungry and sure. Nathan had moved into Jeffrey's apartment officially 6 weeks ago, had merged their lives with an ease that felt natural and right. They developed routines, inside jokes, a shorthand of touches and glances that spoke of deep intimacy, which brought them back to tonight, to Nathan standing in Jeffrey's kitchen with coffee and that vulnerable expression that meant he had something important to say. Jeffrey moved closer, accepting the mug Nathan offered, breathing in the familiar scent that would forever remind him of late-night conversations and breakthrough moments. Nathan's hands were shaking slightly as he lifted his own mug, and Jeffrey felt a flicker of concern. They'd been so happy these past months, so settled into their new reality, that Jeffrey couldn't imagine what might have Nathan looking so nervous. "I had coffee with Jeremy Walker today," Nathan said finally, and Jeffrey's stomach dropped. Jeremy was Nathan's best friend from college, the one person who'd had a hard time accepting Nathan's coming out, who'd made comments about it being a phase, about Nathan just being confused. Jeffrey had met Jeremy exactly once and had immediately disliked his condescending attitude and barely concealed homophobia. Nathan continued, "Jeremy asked me if I was sure about this, about us. He said he was worried I was making a mistake, that I was throwing away my chance at a normal life for something that might not last. He said he was concerned that I was just confused, that maybe I was mistaking intense friendship for something romantic." Jeffrey felt ice form in his stomach. Jeremy's words were too close to Jeffrey's own deepest fears, the ones that crept in during quiet moments when Jeffrey wondered if Nathan might wake up one day and realize he'd made a mistake, might decide that being gay was too hard, that loving Jeffrey wasn't worth the complications it brought to his life. Nathan set down his mug and reached for Jeffrey's hands, his touch warm and steady despite the tremor Jeffrey had noticed earlier. And listening to him talk, Nathan said, "I realized something. I realized that for the first time in my life, someone questioning my choices didn't make me doubt myself. It made me more certain." Jeffrey felt his breath catch, felt hope begin to bloom in his chest even as he tried to prepare himself for disappointment. Nathan's eyes were bright, intense as he continued, "Jeffrey, these past 3 months with you have been the most real, most honest, most right months of my entire life. When Jeremy was talking about normal lives and mistakes, all I could think about was waking up next to you this morning, about the way you hum when you're making breakfast, about how you laugh at my terrible jokes, about how safe I feel when you hold me. I kept thinking, this is my normal. This is my life, and I don't want any other life but this one." Jeffrey felt tears start to blur his vision, felt his heart expand until it felt too big for his chest. "Nathan," he whispered. Nathan moved closer, his hands coming up to frame Jeffrey's face. "I love you," he said, the words clear and certain. "I love you more than I knew it was possible to love another person. I love the way you see the world, the way you make me laugh, the way you believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. I love that you waited for me to figure myself out, that you never pressured me, that you let me come to this at my own pace. I love that you're mine and I'm yours and we built this together." Jeffrey was crying openly now, overwhelmed by the certainty in Nathan's voice, by the love shining in his eyes. "I love you too," Jeffrey managed to say through his tears. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes. I love that you're brave enough to live authentically, that you chose this, chose us, even when it was hard. I love that you make me feel like I'm enough, like I'm home." Nathan kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, Nathan said, "I want to ask you something, and I need you to know I'm completely serious." Jeffrey nodded, not trusting his voice. Nathan took a deep breath. "Move in with me, officially, I mean. I know we've been talking about it, but I mean really move in. Combine our leases, get a place that's ours, not just yours with my stuff added to it. Build a life together that's intentional and chosen and real." Jeffrey felt his heart stop, then start again at double speed. Nathan was asking for forever, for a commitment that went beyond the careful day-by-day approach they'd been taking. He was asking Jeffrey to trust that this was real, that it would last, that they could build something permanent together. Yes, Jeffrey said without hesitation. Yes, absolutely yes. I want that more than anything. Nathan's smile was brilliant, transformative, and he kissed Jeffrey again, deeper this time, with a passion that spoke of relief and joy and certainty. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan said, I already started looking at places. There's this apartment across town, 2 bedrooms, so we can each have an office, big kitchen, balcony with a view of the park. I put in an application today, before I talked to Jeremy, because I knew what I wanted, regardless of what anyone else thought. Jeffrey laughed, amazed by Nathan's certainty, by the way Nathan had moved forward with their life together, even while processing Jeremy's doubts. You already applied for an apartment, he said, shaking his head in wonder. Nathan grinned, looking suddenly younger, more relaxed than he'd looked all evening. I also may have already started packing some of our things, he admitted. And I may have called my mom to tell her we're taking the next step, and she may have started planning a housewarming party. Jeffrey felt laughter bubble up from his chest, pure and joyful. You're incredible, he said, pulling Nathan closer. Absolutely incredible. 3 months ago, you were questioning your sexuality, and now you're planning our future and telling your mother about housewarming parties. Nathan's expression grew serious again. Tender. 3 months ago, I was lost, Jeffrey. I was living a life that didn't fit, trying to be someone I wasn't, settling for relationships that felt like performances. And then you showed me what it felt like to be seen, really seen, for who I actually am. You showed me what love is supposed to feel like. You saved me. Jeffrey shook his head. We saved each other, he corrected. I was just as lost before you. I was hiding, afraid to want what I wanted, afraid to believe I could have it. You taught me that love doesn't have to be hidden or apologetic. You taught me that I deserve to be chosen. They held each other in the quiet kitchen, coffee growing cold on the counter, the weight of the evening's conversation settling into something warm and certain between them. Jeffrey thought about Jeremy's words, about normal lives and mistakes, and realized that Nathan was right. This was their normal, this quiet intimacy, this easy love, this sense of being exactly where they belonged. Nathan pulled back slightly, his hand still framing Jeffrey's face. There's something else, he said, and Jeffrey heard nervousness creep back into his voice. Jeffrey waited, patient, giving Nathan space to find his words. I want to tell people about the apartment, Nathan said. I want to tell everyone. I want to post pictures on social media and invite people over for dinner and introduce you as my boyfriend, my partner, the person I'm building a life with. I know we've been private, and I know that was partly because I needed time to adjust. But I'm ready now. I'm ready to be public about this, about us. Jeffrey felt his breath catch. They had been private, had kept their relationship mostly between themselves and a small circle of close friends. Jeffrey had been fine with that, had understood Nathan's need for privacy while he navigated coming out and adjusted to his new reality. But the idea of being open, of being able to claim Nathan publicly, made Jeffrey's heart race with excitement. Are you sure? Jeffrey asked. I don't want you to feel pressured. We can take as much time as you need. Nathan shook his head. I'm sure, I'm so sure, Jeffrey. I want the world to know that I'm yours. I want to hold your hand in public and kiss you goodbye in front of people and argue about whose turn it is to do dishes where everyone can hear us. I want the full experience of being in love with you. Jeffrey kissed him again, pouring all his love and gratitude and excitement into the contact. When they broke apart, he said, then let's do it. Let's be public and messy and obvious about how much we love each other. Nathan laughed, the sound bright and free. Deal, he said, but first we should probably actually look at this apartment I applied for. I may have gotten a little carried away with the planning. Jeffrey grinned. Show me, he said. Show me our future home. They spent the next hour looking at photos on Nathan's phone, planning furniture arrangements and discussing paint colors, and imagining lazy Sunday mornings in their new space. Jeffrey watched Nathan's face as he talked about their future, saw the excitement and certainty there, and felt something settle into place in his chest, something that felt like peace. Later, as they lay in bed together, Nathan's head on Jeffrey's chest and their legs tangled together under the covers, Jeffrey thought about the journey that had brought them here. 6 months ago, Nathan had been struggling in a relationship that felt wrong, questioning everything about himself, but not knowing how to voice those questions. Jeffrey had been hiding his feelings, protecting himself from rejection, but also protecting Nathan from unwanted attention. Now they were planning a future together, talking about apartments and housewarming parties and being public about their love. The transformation felt miraculous, like something out of a fairy tale, except it was real and solid and theirs. Nathan stirred against his chest, tilting his head up to look at Jeffrey in the dim light filtering through the bedroom windows. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. Jeffrey ran his fingers through Nathan's hair, marveling at the simple intimacy of the gesture, at his right to touch Nathan like this whenever he wanted. "I'm thinking about how brave you are," Jeffrey said. "How brave you've been through all of this. Coming out, changing your whole life, choosing love, even when it was scary." Nathan was quiet for a moment, then said, "I didn't feel brave. Most of the time I felt terrified. But you made it feel safe to be scared, if that makes sense. You made it feel like it was okay to not have all the answers as long as we were figuring it out together." Jeffrey pressed a kiss to the top of Nathan's head. "It makes perfect sense," he said. "You made me feel safe too. Safe to want what I wanted. Safe to believe it could work out." They lay in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the city outside their window, feeling the steady rhythm of each other's breathing. Jeffrey was almost asleep when Nathan spoke again. "Jeffrey," Nathan said, his voice soft and wondering, "I know this might sound silly, but sometimes I can't believe this is real. Sometimes I wake up and I'm surprised all over again that you're here, that this is my life now, that I get to love you and be loved by you." Jeffrey tightened his arms around Nathan, understanding exactly what he meant. "It's not silly," Jeffrey said. "I feel the same way. Like we're living in some alternate universe where everything worked out perfectly, where we both got exactly what we needed." Nathan lifted his head again, his eyes serious in the dim light. "Do you think it will always feel this way?" he asked. "This grateful, this amazed that we found each other?" Jeffrey considered the question, thinking about the couples he knew who had been together for years, decades even. Some had lost that sense of wonder, had settled into comfortable routine that lacked the spark of early love. But others still looked at each other like they couldn't believe their luck, still held hands without thinking about it, still chose each other every day. "I think," Jeffrey said slowly, "it depends on us. I think if we keep choosing each other, if we keep being grateful for what we have instead of taking it for granted, if we keep growing together instead of growing apart, then yes, I think it can always feel this way." Nathan smiled, the expression soft and content. "Then let's do that," he said. "Let's keep choosing each other every day for the rest of our lives." Jeffrey felt his heart swell with love and certainty. "Deal," he said, echoing Nathan's earlier words, "for the rest of our lives." Nathan settled back against Jeffrey's chest, and Jeffrey felt him relax into sleep. But Jeffrey stayed awake a little longer, holding Nathan close and thinking about the future they were building together. Tomorrow they would look at the apartment Nathan had applied for. Next week they would start telling people about their plans. Next month they would be living in their own space, building a home together that belonged to both of them. The thought filled Jeffrey with a contentment so deep it felt like coming home. All those months of hiding his feelings, all those careful conversations where he'd bitten back the words he really wanted to say, all those nights he'd fallen asleep wondering if Nathan would ever see him as more than a friend, they had led to this moment. They had been worth it for this. Jeffrey thought about Nathan's text from earlier that evening, the simple question that had started it all. "Do you want some company tonight?" Such ordinary words for such an extraordinary invitation. Nathan had been asking for more than just company, Jeffrey realized now. He had been asking for partnership, for commitment, for a shared future. He had been asking Jeffrey to choose him back, and Jeffrey would continue to choose him every day for as long as Nathan would have him. They had found something rare and precious together, something worth protecting and nurturing and celebrating. They had found home in each other. The next morning, Jeffrey woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Nathan humming in the kitchen. He lay in bed for a moment, listening to the domestic sounds of Nathan moving around their space, and felt that same sense of amazed gratitude that Nathan had described the night before. This was his life now, this warmth, this contentment, this love that filled every corner of his existence. Jeffrey found Nathan at the stove making pancakes and swaying slightly to music only he could hear. Nathan was wearing one of Jeffrey's t-shirts and a pair of boxers, his hair sticking up in all directions, and Jeffrey thought he had never seen anything more beautiful. "Good morning," Jeffrey said, wrapping his arms around Nathan from behind and pressing a kiss to his neck. Nathan leaned back against him, solid and warm and real. "Good morning," Nathan replied, tilting his head to give Jeffrey better access to his neck. "I made coffee, and I'm making pancakes, and I may have already called the apartment complex about setting up a viewing for this afternoon." Jeffrey laughed against Nathan's skin. "You really don't waste time, do you?" Nathan turned in Jeffrey's arms, spatula still in hand, his expression suddenly serious. "I wasted enough time being confused and scared and living the wrong life," he said. "Now that I know what I want, now that I know what makes me happy, I don't want to wait anymore. I want to start our life together as soon as possible." Jeffrey cupped Nathan's face in his hands, overwhelmed by the certainty in Nathan's voice, by the love shining in his eyes. "I love you," Jeffrey said, the words feeling both familiar and miraculous. "I love your enthusiasm and your certainty and the way you dive headfirst into everything that matters to you." Nathan grinned. "Even when what matters to me is you?" he asked. "Especially when what matters to you is me," Jeffrey replied, and kissed him thoroughly, tasting coffee and morning and the promise of all their tomorrows. The pancakes burned while they kissed, but neither of them cared. They made new ones together, bumping hips and stealing kisses and planning their day around the apartment viewing Nathan had scheduled. Jeffrey watched Nathan flip pancakes with the same focused intensity he brought to everything else, and felt his heart expand with love and possibility. Later, as they sat at the kitchen table sharing breakfast and scrolling through apartment listings on Nathan's laptop, Jeffrey thought about how different this morning was from all the mornings that had come before. 6 months ago, he had eaten breakfast alone, had gotten ready for work in silence, had carried the weight of his unexpressed feelings like a stone in his chest. Now Nathan was here, feet tangled with Jeffrey's under the table, debating the merits of hardwood versus laminate flooring with the seriousness of someone planning a future. The apartment viewing went better than either of them had dared to hope. The space was bright and airy, with large windows that let in streams of golden sunlight and a kitchen that was big enough for both of them to cook in without getting in each other's way. Nathan walked through the rooms with the confidence of someone who already belonged there, pointing out where they could put their desk and their bookshelves and the couch they would need to buy together. Jeffrey followed, watching Nathan claim the space with his enthusiasm and his plans, and felt something click into place. This would be their home, the first place that belonged to both of them equally, the foundation for whatever came next. The landlord, a kind woman named Linda Morgan, seemed charmed by Nathan's excitement and Jeffrey's quiet contentment. She approved their application on the spot, shaking their hands and welcoming them to the building with a warmth that made Jeffrey feel like they were already part of a community. As they walked back to Jeffrey's car, Nathan grabbed Jeffrey's hand, lacing their fingers together with the unconscious ease of someone who had every right to do so. "We just got our first apartment together," Nathan said, his voice full of wonder. "We're really doing this." Jeffrey squeezed Nathan's hand, feeling the solid reality of Nathan's fingers intertwined with his own. "We're really doing this," he agreed. "We're building a life together." That evening, they called their families to share the news. Nathan's parents were thrilled, his mother immediately launching into plans for decorating and housewarming gifts. Jeffrey's parents were more reserved but genuinely happy, asking practical questions about the move and offering to help with packing. The conversations felt normal, domestic, like the kind of calls couples made all the time when they reached new milestones together. After the calls, they settled on the couch with a bottle of wine, Nathan's head in Jeffrey's lap, while Jeffrey ran his fingers through Nathan's hair. The television was on, but neither of them was really watching, too caught up in planning and dreaming and marveling at how quickly their lives were changing. "Jeffrey," Nathan said suddenly, his voice thoughtful, "do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't figured myself out? If I had stayed with Carol, or found another girlfriend? If I had never realized what I was feeling for you?" Jeffrey's hands stilled in Nathan's hair. The thought was too painful to contemplate fully. The idea of Nathan living a half-life while Jeffrey continued to love him in secret. I try not to think about it, Jeffrey admitted. It makes me too sad. Imagining you trapped in relationships that didn't make you happy. Imagining myself watching you settle for something less than what you deserved. Nathan turned to look up at Jeffrey, his expression serious. I think about it sometimes, he said. Not because I have regrets, but because it makes me realize how lucky we are. How easily we could have missed this. How many people probably do miss it because they're too scared or too conditioned to think outside the boxes they've been put in. Jeffrey nodded, understanding what Nathan meant. They had been lucky, incredibly lucky, that Nathan had been brave enough to question everything he thought he knew about himself. That Jeffrey had been patient enough to wait without pushing. That they had found their way to each other despite all the obstacles that could have kept them apart. It makes me want to help other people find what we found. Nathan continued, I've been thinking about volunteering with that LGBTQ youth organization downtown. Maybe sharing my story with people who are struggling with coming out later in life. I know how isolating it can feel to question your sexuality when you're not a teenager anymore. When everyone assumes you've already figured yourself out. Jeffrey felt his heart swell with pride and love. Nathan's journey of self-discovery hadn't made him want to hide or minimize his experience. Instead, it had made him want to reach out to others who might be struggling with similar questions. That's beautiful, Jeffrey said. I think you would be amazing at that. You have this way of making people feel safe to be vulnerable, to ask hard questions about themselves. Nathan smiled up at Jeffrey. Would you want to do it with me? He asked. I know our stories are different, but maybe together we could help people see that there are lots of ways to figure yourself out. Lots of timelines for coming to terms with who you are. Jeffrey felt tears prick at his eyes, overwhelmed by the idea of turning their love story into something that could help others find their own happiness. I would love that, he said. I would love to do that with you. They spent the rest of the evening talking about possibilities, about the ways they might be able to support others who were struggling with questions of identity and love. The conversation felt like a natural extension of their relationship, a way of honoring what they had found together by helping others find their own versions of happiness. As they got ready for bed that night, Jeffrey watched Nathan brush his teeth in the bathroom mirror and felt struck by the ordinariness of the moment. 6 months ago, this simple domestic scene would have seemed impossible, a fantasy too precious to even hope for. Now it was just Tuesday night, just Nathan getting ready for bed in Jeffrey's bathroom like he belonged there, which he did. Nathan caught Jeffrey's eye in the mirror and grinned around his toothbrush, foam at the corners of his mouth. Jeffrey laughed, overwhelmed by affection for this man who had turned Jeffrey's careful, quiet life into something bright and full and real. In bed, they curled together with the easy intimacy of people who had learned each other's rhythms and preferences. Nathan traced lazy patterns on Jeffrey's chest while Jeffrey played with Nathan's hair, both of them too content to rush toward sleep. Jeffrey, Nathan said softly. Thank you. For what? Jeffrey asked, though he thought he knew what Nathan meant. For waiting for me, Nathan said. For being patient while I figured myself out. For never making me feel like I was taking too long or asking too much. For loving me even when I didn't know how to love myself. Jeffrey pressed a kiss to the top of Nathan's head. Thank you for being brave enough to question everything you thought you knew about yourself, he replied. Thank you for choosing love even when it was scary. Thank you for choosing me. Nathan lifted his head to look at Jeffrey, his eyes soft and serious in the dim light. I'll keep choosing you, he said. Every day, for as long as you'll have me. Jeffrey cupped Nathan's face in his hands, overwhelmed by the promise in Nathan's voice, by the certainty that this was just the beginning of their story together. For as long as I'll have you, Jeffrey repeated. That's going to be a very long time. Nathan smiled, the expression radiant and sure. Good, he said. I was hoping you'd say that. 3 weeks later, they were officially moved into their new apartment, surrounded by boxes and the chaos of two lives being merged into one shared space. Nathan had thrown himself into the move with his characteristic enthusiasm, color-coding boxes, and creating elaborate spreadsheets to track their belongings. Jeffrey had watched with amused affection as Nathan turned what could have been a stressful process into something organized and efficient. Their first night in the new place, they ordered pizza and ate it sitting on the floor of their empty living room, surrounded by boxes but grinning at each other like they had accomplished something miraculous. The apartment felt huge and full of possibility, every room a blank canvas waiting for them to fill it with their shared life. Nathan had insisted on christening every room, kissing Jeffrey thoroughly in the kitchen, the bedroom, the office that would be Nathan's workspace, even the bathroom. "This is ours," he had said after each kiss, his voice full of wonder and possession. "This is really ours." Jeffrey had felt the same amazement, the same disbelief that they had actually done it, had actually built something together that belonged to both of them. The apartment was more than just a place to live. It was proof of their commitment to each other, evidence that what they had was real and lasting and worth investing in. Now, 3 weeks into their new life together, they had settled into routines that felt natural and right. Nathan made coffee every morning while Jeffrey showered. Jeffrey cooked dinner most nights while Nathan graded papers at the kitchen table. They did laundry together on Sundays, folding clothes while music played and debating what to watch on television later. The domesticity of it all still amazed Jeffrey sometimes. He would catch himself washing dishes next to Nathan or reading in bed while Nathan worked on his laptop and feel struck by the simple miracle of sharing space with someone he loved, of building a life that accommodated both of their needs and preferences. Nathan had started volunteering with the LGBTQ youth organization as he had planned, and Jeffrey had joined him. They facilitated a monthly support group for people coming out later in life, sharing their own story and creating space for others to explore their own questions about identity and love. The work was rewarding and meaningful, a way of giving back to the community that had supported Nathan through his own journey of self-discovery. Jeffrey loved watching Nathan in those meetings, loved seeing how Nathan's natural warmth and enthusiasm helped people feel safe to be vulnerable. Nathan had a gift for asking the right questions, for creating space for people to explore their feelings without judgment or pressure. Jeffrey contributed his own perspective, sharing what it had been like to love someone who was struggling with their identity, offering support to the partners and friends of people who were questioning their sexuality. Together, they made a good team, complementing each other's strengths and creating an environment where people felt heard and supported. Jeffrey thought about the conversation they had had months ago about helping others find what they had found and felt proud of the way they had turned that intention into action. One evening, after a particularly moving support group meeting, they walked home through the park near their apartment, hands linked and comfortable in silence stretching between them. The autumn air was crisp and clear, and Jeffrey felt that familiar sense of contentment that came from doing meaningful work with someone he loved. Nathan stopped suddenly, tugging on Jeffrey's hand to bring him to a halt near a bench overlooking the small pond at the center of the park. "Jeffrey," Nathan said, his voice serious, "there's something I want to ask you." Jeffrey felt his heart skip, though he couldn't say why. Nathan's tone was serious but not worried, thoughtful rather than anxious. Jeffrey waited patient, giving Nathan space to find his words. Nathan turned to face Jeffrey fully, his hands coming up to frame Jeffrey's face in the gesture that had become so familiar, so precious. "Jeffrey," he said, his voice soft and sure, "I know we've only been together officially for 6 months, and I know that might seem fast to some people, but I need you to know something." Jeffrey's breath caught, sensing that whatever Nathan was about to say was important, life-changing even. Nathan's eyes were bright and certain as he continued, "I want to spend the rest of my life with you, Jeffrey. I want to marry you when the time is right, when we're both ready. I want to grow old with you and travel with you and build something lasting and beautiful together. I know we don't need to decide anything right now, but I needed you to know that's where my heart is, that's what I'm hoping for." Jeffrey felt tears spring to his eyes, felt his heart expand until it felt too big for his chest. Nathan wasn't proposing exactly, wasn't asking for an immediate answer or commitment. He was sharing his hopes, his vision for their future, his certainty that what they had was worth building a lifetime around. "Nathan," Jeffrey whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "I want that too. I want all of that with you. I want to marry you and build a life with you and grow old together. I want to be your family." Nathan's smile was radiant, transformative, and he kissed Jeffrey right there in the park, under the street lights and the autumn stars. The kiss was soft and sure and full of promise, a seal on the future they were planning together. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan said, "So we're doing this. We're really building a life together. The whole thing, marriage and a house and maybe kids someday, and growing old together on our front porch." Jeffrey laughed, overwhelmed by Nathan's enthusiasm, by the way Nathan painted their future in such vivid, specific detail. "We're really doing this," Jeffrey agreed. "The whole thing, whatever that looks like for us." They walked the rest of the way home in comfortable silence, both lost in thoughts of the future they were planning together. Jeffrey thought about the journey that had brought them here. From that first night when Nathan had confessed his confusion about his sexuality to this moment when they were planning a lifetime together. The transformation still felt miraculous, like something out of a fairy tale, except it was real and solid in theirs. Back at their apartment, they settled on the couch they had bought together, Nathan's head in Jeffrey's lap while Jeffrey ran his fingers through Nathan's hair. The television was on, but neither of them was watching, too caught up in the warmth and contentment of being home together. "Jeffrey," Nathan said softly, his voice drowsy and content. "Do you remember that night when I first told you I thought I might not be as straight as I thought?" Jeffrey's hands stilled in Nathan's hair, remembering that pivotal conversation, the way Nathan's confession had broken open Jeffrey's carefully constructed walls. "I remember," Jeffrey said. "I remember thinking that everything was about to change, and not knowing if that was terrifying or wonderful." Nathan turned to look up at Jeffrey, his expression soft and thoughtful. "It was both, wasn't it?" he said. "Terrifying and wonderful, all the best things are." Jeffrey nodded, understanding exactly what Nathan meant. Their love story had been built on a foundation of fear and hope, of taking risks and trusting that the other person would catch them when they fell. It had required courage from both of them, the willingness to step into uncertainty for the possibility of something extraordinary. "I'm glad we were brave," Jeffrey said. "I'm glad we took the risk." Nathan smiled up at Jeffrey, his eyes bright with love and certainty. "Me too," he said. "I'm glad we found each other. I'm glad we chose each other. I'm glad we're building this life together." Jeffrey leaned down to kiss Nathan's forehead, overwhelmed by gratitude for this man who had changed everything, who had taught Jeffrey what love could feel like when it was mutual and chosen and real. They had found something rare and precious together, something worth protecting and nurturing and celebrating for the rest of their lives. Outside their apartment, the city continued its nightly rhythm, millions of people living their own stories of love and loss and hope. But inside, Jeffrey and Nathan had created their own small world, a space where love was safe and celebrated and allowed to grow without fear or shame. Jeffrey thought about Nathan's text from that night months ago, the simple question that had started it all. "Do you want some company tonight?" Such ordinary words for such an extraordinary invitation. Nathan had been asking for more than just company, Jeffrey realized now. He had been asking for partnership, for commitment, for a shared future. He had been asking Jeffrey to choose him back, and Jeffrey would continue to choose him every day for as long as Nathan would have him. They had found something rare and precious together, something worth building a lifetime around. They had found home in each other, and that home would grow and change and evolve as they did. But it would always be theirs, always be safe, always be filled with the kind of love that made everything else possible. As Nathan drifted off to sleep in Jeffrey's lap, Jeffrey stayed awake a little longer, holding this moment close, marveling at the simple miracle of loving someone who loved him back. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new joys, new opportunities to choose each other and build their life together. But tonight they were exactly where they belonged, in their own space, surrounded by the evidence of their shared life, safe in the knowledge that they had found something worth keeping. Sometimes the most beautiful love stories are the ones that catch you completely off guard, Jeffrey thought as he watched Nathan sleep. Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as ordinary questions, as simple invitations for company that turn into invitations for forever. Sometimes the scariest leaps of faith lead to the softest landings, to the kind of love that feels like coming home. Nathan stirred slightly in his sleep, unconsciously reaching for Jeffrey's hand, and Jeffrey smiled as their fingers intertwined without thought or effort. This was their story now, this quiet love, this easy intimacy, this certainty that they belonged together. It wasn't the story either of them had expected to be living 6 months ago, but it was theirs, and it was beautiful, and it was just the beginning.